Is that the ideal man for, being in a relationship with Sophia? He's very consistent, is he not?
He is. I imagine, him just, Sophia being all over his life. Like his life being about Sophia. Because his life is about, his life now is about the World Cup.
Yes.
That's amazing.
You can change that, and makes...
Would you do that? For what cause would you give that kind of devotion, that kind of your all to?
Every market has a madman. Now, if you don't know a madman in that market, guess who's the madman? Sophia, please.
The madman in Morning Express. Thanks, James. Our relationship conversation this Wednesday, which we're welcoming you to be part of, is on standards. So I was having a conversation with some of my friends yesterday, and about very many single women out there who are saying that it's very hard to find an eligible single man. Most of those who may qualify in some women's standards are already taken. So the question of standards then came in. Do women now have too many higher standards, or men? You're looking for this man who has, 2 cars, a mansion, has a salary that's 6-7 figures, and you forget that boy next to you, that man, let's even call him that. And also, what are the deal breakers? Are we being a little bit too superficial, too light on the things that break a relationship in this day and age? We're all about your relationship this morning, and do feel free to talk to us as well. Our numbers will be on your screen. You can call in and be part of this chat. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
You too.
So, and as far as, I know you have in the past said that there are, compared to the men and the women, there are more eligible men. No, there are fewer eligible men.
Yeah.
Fewer. How did we first even get to that place?
Well, because women are choosy. It's as simple as that. I mean,
Yeah.
Would you marry a drunk? Would you marry an unemployed guy? Would you marry somebody who's 4 feet tall? Do all that, and suddenly you run out of men.
So women are choosy. Aren't men choosy?
Yes, they are, but they are a lot less choosy
choosier.
than... Yeah, no. I think women are far choosier than men.
Okay.
I mean, for example, men don't actually care how much a woman earns. They care that she's young and beautiful. That's about it.
Okay. She just needs to be hot. Not just hot, that's it. For a man, for a woman, what is it this modern day woman considers before getting into a relationship?
Well, of course, she's got a whole list of very sensible things, like you should be honest, faithful, all the usual things. But on top of that, she wants him to be successful. Now, unfortunately, successful is relative, isn't it? Some people succeed and some people fail. You can't succeed without someone else failing. So if you have that ideal, the guy you marry is going to be a success in life, that automatically means you're competing for just a few men.
Yeah, and people will, define success differently. Some, it will be in relation to where they're at themselves. For some, it's where their fathers are or whoever they consider successful. So it is relative, as you said. But let's talk about setting the standards. For a single person, and many single people hoping and planning to get into relationships, what is it they should be putting in mind? Because is it first of all important to have that, or should you just be living your life, and if it so happens you bump into this great person, good for you? Or should you plan and being aware that if it does happen, I will weigh or eliminate or use this list to determine if I'll get into anything with this person?
I mean, I think you started that idea off in a very interesting way. Everybody should live their own life, no question about that. They should try and imagine what it is they want to have achieved in their lives and go for it. Now, the real question is that something that involves family, marriage, and so on? If it isn't, then of course you just let life happen. You just concentrate on your career or whatever it is you want. But if you do want it to include a family, children, a husband, then the most important thing you've got to do is you've got to give it enough priority. It's very easy to think, oh, I'll do that next year or the year after. You do that 4 or 5 years in a row, and all of a sudden, well, of course, to be blunt, half the single men have been married in that time, and wait another couple of years, they'll all be married. So I think the starting point is you've got to know in yourself what your real priorities are, and be sincere with yourself early enough, like in your mid-20s, as to what your real goal is, and then set out to achieve it.
Okay. So when you're clear about that, and as far as the man or the woman is concerned, do I need to have a list per
I
se?
think everybody does. I don't know whether
written down? Or
no,
more
I don't
like
suppose people...
mentally have it in my head, no,
a few people write it down, but I think everybody's got one in their head.
Okay.
And I'm afraid it starts with some very basic things like tall. I mean, how many women do you know who say what they really want to do is marry a short man? You don't know it.
Those?
No,
Share with us if you
nah, come on, there aren't many.
Okay.
And then most people are going to say he must be hardworking, he must be, get his act together, he's got to be successful. And okay, then it starts to get a bit vague. What he actually looks like is perhaps less important. But those sorts of things are actually heavily defining. If you, like I say, if you insist on him being successful, then you're in competition with everybody else.
With everybody. Because everyone does want a successful person.
Yeah, well, you're quite right. A few people don't. A few people will marry a penniless poet, but they've probably got a bob or two themselves,
There are people who want to marry a...
Well, a few people do. Not many.
Yeah. For sure, there will not be many.
Not be many.
Because, I imagine that is not the way most people would look at their lives. There's a song that some of the words in that, the lyrics are that I'd rather cry in a Mercedes or whatever car than be happy.
Yes, quite.
Bicycle and so a lot of people would. So you have this list of what it is you want and the standards. When then you meet a person, do they have to 100% meet everything? How then do you weigh this against a reality, a real situation of actually meeting someone?
I think, when people actually meet someone face to face, quite a lot of the things on the list go out of the window. They've got this ideal in their minds, but then they're suddenly faced with somebody who doesn't match the ideal, but on the other hand has got things they perhaps didn't anticipate, and they didn't realize that those were actually quite important. So, for example, you might meet someone who is successful in his own way, but perhaps not in the way that, say, portrayed in the glossy magazines. Maybe he's a very good craftsman, not rich by any means, but hard-working, and suddenly you discover he's faithful, has a tremendous sense of humour, and really makes you feel good. Now all of a sudden you start compromising on what you thought you had in your mind in terms of success. So people do compromise like that, and to be honest, I think more people should compromise like that.
Okay, on what things should one not compromise on?
I think you shouldn't compromise at all on, for example, honesty. If you are talking with someone and you realize that they don't tell you the truth, you don't know things about them, you are unwilling to tell them things because you don't trust them to keep it secret. If you're starting off a relationship where there's no honesty, I wouldn't go much further. I'd be pretty much hung up on things like faithfulness. I would want, in a relationship, we all know it doesn't always work out, but I would want someone to have that value, that they are intending to be faithful. I'd want to believe that that person was generous. In other words, they were going to share everything they had and not play games with me. Not secretly building up blocks of flats somewhere without me knowing about it. I think if you start finding things like that, that person becomes a real contender. And so long as they don't have some of the real negatives, there's a few you mustn't get involved in. Don't marry somebody with a personality disorder or a raging drunk. So there's a list of yeses and a list of
issues.
Exactly.
Violence, okay. Some would be, in a relationship or wanting to get into one, and what I'm hearing you say is don't give ground. Do not. What is the word? I'm losing the word. Don't negotiate.
Right.
On and as far as character is concerned, and as far as what is important, the person's behavior and their traits. But in terms of height, weight,
I'd agree with that. I think there are some things that you absolutely mustn't compromise on, and for example, honesty is one of them. I simply wouldn't compromise on that. On the other hand, height, wealth, I think those are variable things. You can make an enormously happy life out of quite a little amount of money, actually. Just depend on how you choose to spend your time. If you must have the latest Mercedes every year, of course, if that makes you happy, fine, you're going to have to marry a very rich man. But maybe that's not so important. Maybe you could have a really happy life living on a different standard. And so be prepared to compromise on things like that, but don't compromise on things like honesty and personality issues.
What do you tell a person every person who's their type is married or in another relationship, that they're single and those who are available don't quite match their criteria?
You know, that happens to a lot of people. Broadly speaking, if a lady is more than about 35 years old and she's looking for a husband, she will not be successful in terms of finding a single man who will meet her criteria, because they all marry before that age. And the only ones who are left have got something seriously wrong with them. They've failed on one of those criteria that really matter.
Okay.
And you don't want to touch them. So once you get to that critical age, and it really is round about 35, you're going to have to start saying, I'm willing to marry somebody who's been in a relationship, divorced, or whatever. And that becomes a very important compromise. I know ladies who say, I simply can't do that. They're 37 years old and they say, I will not marry a divorced man. Well, sorry, you probably won't marry at all in that case.
Yeah. And what about a second wife? In situation?
That is very tricky. I mean, we're really on very dodgy ground there, aren't we? But the fact of the matter is a lot of women do compromise like that. They are more willing to be a mistress or a second wife or a girlfriend to a very successful man than to be a first wife for a guy who's not really meeting all their standards.
Okay.
And
So
I'm afraid that really does happen.
It really does happen. And that is happening, in your opinion, is it because the standards are too on what is mundane or what is just, about the wealth and good life than the character of person? Or is it both? Or is it hard to tell?
You know, in a very simple-minded way, I would say don't compromise. Go and find a man who meets the character issues very, very well. And maybe you don't end up with as much money as you would wish, but you have this man to yourself and you can make a very good life, albeit it'll be at a lower level than perhaps you thought. If you insist on having the standard of living, for whatever reason, then probably at least some women are going to have to compromise like that. If you don't want, for example, to be married to somebody who's divorced, got a large family, you don't fancy being in the step relationship like that, then maybe you're going to have to make a compromise of that type.
How important is age in, a standard set, I don't date anybody younger than this or older than this. How important is it? Should it be a key factor?
Well, it's a practical factor. I mean, any woman who's trying to marry a man who's not really completed his education or got set in life, and he's about 24, 25 years old, he won't marry, so you'll just be wasting your time. On the other hand, single and above 35, there's probably a very good reason why he's single. So in that sense, age is important, but it's not important in any other respect. So in other words, it doesn't really matter what the difference is between man and woman in this day and age. It used to matter a lot. When life expectancies were short, you couldn't have too big a difference. The man couldn't be too much older, for example. On the other hand, the older a man is, the more wealthy he is. So you strike a compromise. Now, in the old days, that was 3 to 5 years. Nowadays, that really doesn't become an issue. People are marrying with huge differences, 10, 20, 30 years in both directions.
But as far as maturity, interests are concerned, it doesn't weigh in with age?
Well, it does, at the extremes.
Yeah.
I mean, a 50-year-old man going out with a 20-year-old woman, well, he's either going to have to love dancing or he's going to have a very rough life.
Going to the club.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's only in issues like that, really. It's certainly not an issue in terms of health and so on. I don't think society cares as much as it used to. Society used to be very prescriptive, didn't it, in terms of what it expected people to do. We don't care as much.
We don't care now. But when it's reversed, society does seem to care a little bit. When it's the woman that's older.
Yeah, yes. But within reason, it's okay. I mean, a woman who's 10, 15 years older than a man is not going to excite much. People aren't going to say very much. 30 years older, if she's 80...
Even 10, they wouldn't care?
Well, there's plenty of examples.
Like...
Well, Madonna.
Well, those are the extreme. And they're always, you know, they make it to the news. You know, a man who's 30 years older or 20 years
Everything
older.
Madonna does makes it to the news.
Exactly.
But it doesn't alter the fact that she married somebody quite a bit younger than her.
Quite a bit younger.
Yeah.
So women can... So age, in your opinion, should not be a key factor as far as...
No. I mean,
setting that.
you've got to be careful about the ridiculous extremes. I mean, if a very pretty young girl is on the arms of an 85-year-old short, fat man, we all jump to conclusions, don't we?
We all know what that is.
We all know exactly what's going on. So,
Okay.
you know, perhaps you ought to think about that sort of thing. But I dare say she'd still marry him.
Really?
Well, yes. I mean, it happens all the time, doesn't it? She just hopes he doesn't hang around too long.
Which is so sadistic. But of course very closely linked to standards and deciding what it is you're going to get into a relationship with, whether it's a man or a woman, is what you do not want. There's knowing what you want, and then there's what you don't want, which comes to the deal breakers. And what for you, I tweeted that earlier, and a lot of the tweets that are coming in is that for most people, deal breakers are cheating. That if whoever I'm with cheats on me, then it's done. Should that be the deal breaker?
I think in early courtship, perhaps you should be a little bit tolerant, because sometimes people are a bit vague about whether or not they're properly in a relationship yet. And a little later, when you're beginning to be committed to one another, it should definitely be a deal breaker. If you're 9 months into a relationship and beginning to think about a wedding, and one of you is cheating, definitely I wouldn't go any further at all. Once you're in a marriage, of course, and there's a mortgage and 3 children, of course, very few people actually break up because of an infidelity. They break up for a lot of other things. And I think those need to be the deal breakers. If you sense, for example, that the man you're chasing after can't control alcohol, literally drinks himself stupid and does ridiculous things as a consequence, or has real issues in terms of his personality, can't control anger, is violent, those are definitely deal breakers.
Okay. So in as far as cheating, when you say early on there should be some form of tolerance, if it starts at the beginning, doesn't that already portend for a bad relationship?
Well,
that he's going to cheat
it
again?
depends on how you start, you see. I mean, a lot of relationships start with a phase of no commitment. You know, you go out for a first cup of coffee with somebody and nobody actually mentions dating at all. Are you right to insist that that person has no other female friends? No, obviously not. And as the 1 or 2, 3 weeks go by, where do you start to draw the line as to where are you an item? And a lot of couples very wisely actually sit down and talk about that. They actually say, hey, I think you are an item. Let's from now on agree, nobody else. And that is quite a good indicator that a relationship's going to be successful if they think like that and have that conversation.
All right.
But lots don't.
We have Ben asking about the place of when the parents are talking about same tribe, and I guess not very clear the question, but coming from a place of standard setting, and their parents who insist perhaps and maintain that you marry or be with somebody from the same community. How important is that, and what do you tell somebody who's in a situation perhaps where they have that push and pull with their loved ones?
I mean, I don't doubt for a moment that 100 years ago it was a very important thing. People really did care. If you look around the world, clearly the tide of opinion is going completely the other way. You see endless examples of people who've married across racial, across national, etc. boundaries. And it has to be said that those marriages are often very successful. So from a dispassionate point of view, I would say pay no attention at all to that. None at all. But there are 1 or 2 downsides, like, for example, people's expectations of how marriage works definitely are rooted in their community. And so if you're marrying somebody from a very different background to yourself, expect a few fireworks. If you can turn those into fun, you can enjoy the differences between you, then you're going to be very successful. But a lot of people do find them quite trying. So in that sense, you've got to be a little bit careful, but not in the sense that you must marry somebody from your own community. There's no reason why you should do that. Just expect that if you don't, expect one or two little difficulties in terms of communication and expectations.
Yeah.
But otherwise, do it, because if you look around the world, the interracial marriages, they're taking over the world. And when you look at the children born of interracial marriages, they're lovely, and they really will inherit the earth.
Okay, let's talk to Onyango. I'll follow up on that because there are cases where the parents will be very adamant as far as, you know, if that's you're going to go down that way, then don't invite us to the wedding.
Sure.
We don't want to be
Yes.
part of that, you know, family. Onyango, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
I'm fine.
We can barely hear you. I think we need some volume in studio. How are you?
I'm fine.
Yes, talk to us.
Yes. I'm watching at and I'm watching at Princess Wed. And I'm confirming that what you are doing is what you're saying can be true.
Onyango, your line is not good at all. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm asking a question whether if what you are saying on the screen now is there about the relationship.
Okay, Onyango, we're not getting you. Hopefully we'll be able to get you back. Please do call back, and it will be great to hear from you, Onyango. Yes, so in cases where there's that kind of ultimatum also from parents saying, you know what, if we go down this way, we don't want to be part of it.
Yes, and that does happen. And of course, it can get worse than that. You might, for example, have someone marrying across a religious barrier, and then you discover that both religions, say, walk away from you and say, we won't conduct the ceremony and things like that. That does happen. And of course, it means that the couple are going to have some very sincere conversations about whether they can stand up to all that pressure.
Yeah.
I know lots of cases where couples have stood up against that pressure and have been very successful. And of course, eventually the family comes round. I mean, the moment the grandchildren appear, the parents have got a decision to make, and usually they cave in at that point.
Yeah.
So I think if you are really serious and genuine about one another and have got the sort of relationship where you can talk about the sorts of things that will be issues, then go for it, without a doubt.
It'll need a great deal of resolve.
Yes, and in some ways, because it tests the relationship so hard early on, if you pass that test, the chances are nothing else is going to bother you.
It's going to bother you. We have Leah. Good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
Go ahead with your contribution.
Okay, then first I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, I'm in this relationship. With a guy who was married. Okay, he had a lady. They had 2 kids. Then they broke up. By the time I was dating this guy, he was single for like a year. So we got together, and then I got pregnant. He took me to the parents. He tried to the condition on me. Then the lady came back, and he started to do some scenarios, but I'm taking his man, things like that. So I talked to my husband, and I told him, because the lady came out of me, let's try to see her and put her comfortable. But now that it's been a problem up to now, it comes to my house, putting I don't know.
Leah, I'm going to have to stop you there because your line as well is not clear. Can barely make out a thing you're saying. We're sorry about that. Hopefully we can still maybe reach us on SMS, but we cannot make out a thing. I don't know if you're able to tell.
Couldn't make it out.
Really is terrible. We will work on that. Sorry about that for those of you who are trying to reach us this morning. But yes, you say for couples that will have gone through such a situation where, you know, it has taken a tough, united front to be able to get through that family coming in between and saying, no, we don't want this to happen, then they have better chances of surviving other.
Yes, I think if you think about it, every one of us face a lot of difficulties in our lives. Some of them can be very serious indeed, whether within the relationship or not. And the way you know whether or not you're going to be able to cope with that is how you cope with smaller things, the smaller difficulties that occur each day. And so anyone who is facing up to quite a lot of difficulties early on in a relationship is really training for the really tough stuff that's going to happen later on.
Yeah.
And so yes, they are better able later on to be successful.
Okay. Finally, Chris, for the late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, late and going on, who are single and are in the place of they've dated, of course, quite a number.
Yes.
And we've talked about those who feel that everybody who matches what they want is already taken. What then is your advice as far as, setting that mark of, okay, this is what I'm going to take, this is what I'm not going to take, and this is where I'm going to compromise. And also, this is what I'm going to do in as far as I'm concerned, what the inward look as well, not always
Yes.
looking at everybody being perfect and forgetting that we also need to be good partners.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I would say to anybody, first decide what you want in your life, and if it includes a family and a spouse, start looking for that early, because you're quite right. As the time goes on, it gets progressively more and more difficult.
Right.
So start early. The second thing is, there are some things you must compromise on, and there are some things you must never compromise on. You mustn't compromise on, well, let's loosely call it character, honesty, faithfulness, hard work, willingness to persevere and really muck in when it's necessary. Kindness, generosity, these things are really important. They sound a bit old-fashioned, but they seriously
They're
are.
key.
Don't compromise at all on things like that. If you find yourself with somebody who clearly doesn't match those things, like, for example, they're controlling or abusive or cruel in any way, don't go there. And they may be as rich as anything, but just don't go there, because money, in the end of the day, will not compensate you for that.
All right, Director, allow me to ask this last one. Ibu Momani is asking, what can one do in a situation where compatible, but money is an issue, she earns more? Very quickly.
Oh, well, I personally wouldn't worry about that at all. I'd be delighted if my wife earned more than me.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
I would not want to earn more than my... I don't know.
Unfortunately, a lot of women agree with you. A lot of women pray secretly at night and let him earn more than me, Yes, I agree. For a lot of people, it does matter. Personally, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
But
So what does he do?
what does he do? I'd marry her and work harder.
To hopefully earn more. at
Yes,
some point.
absolutely.
Well said. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
For all that advice. Somebody was asking where to find you on Twitter. Your Twitter handle is?
Cool Kenya.
At Cool Kenya. Cool with a
COOL.
C-double. It could be K.
Yeah, it could.
You could be one of those people. All right, thank you. And all of you for watching this morning, and all of your feedback. On earlier on, the question of the day as well, just to remind you, we're engaging with you on what you think about the ban by the Inspector General of Police on political rallies. We know court has been preparing. A lot of has gone down preparing for the homecoming of their leader, Raila Odinga, with several rallies already held and one planned for Saturday. And this is what you have to say. If I have time to read some of his feedback. Steve Miner, enough about the IG. Already, he is a man that really needs to redirect his energies in ensuring Kenyans are safe. And then we have Mahmoud. Sharif was talking about something totally different about somebody's talks. Kitui Agre Mabolo. Let us not play politics with gatherings. What if an explosion happens? Will then the government be blamed? You ask about that. And one last one. Yes, I support it because it's a threat to the state security. Geoffrey Osebe. Hiroki John is saying no, the ban smells of stifling and gaggings. Indeed, security agencies are conspiring with the government, and many more of your messages. Thank you so much for watching the show today. We'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your day. I'm Sophia Wanuna.